How's it going?
Everything is fine. How are you?
Great, great, great. I'm good.
Okay. Got stuck in some work?
Excuse me?
Are you stuck in some work?
No, no, no. I totally forgot it was 8 o'clock, and I forgot to log on. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So yeah, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
hmm Okay. Yesterday we saw a flat file to flat file extraction. So we will see today we will see the connections and extractions and data stores. First we will log into our local repository. Alright, so yesterday we saw how do we extract the data from an Excel file and write it into a text file. So just let me see if we have some other source files like .txt files and all so that we can utilize them. Okay, I have a flat file called customers and which is of type .txt text file. So we will try to read this, or I have flat file underscore customers. Okay, so this is a scenario where we read the .txt files. It's one and the same. Yesterday we saw a .xls file which we will add it from here, right? Go for a new, and we gave the credentials here, the directory, the path from where we are fetching the flat file xls file, and the file name and the worksheet. Use the first values as column. So today we will see how do we read the data from a .txt file. So to read the data from a .txt file, first we need to attach the txt file to Data Services Designer. So that can be done from here directly. So select the file formats and or flat files and go for new, or you can right click in the white area here and go for new and select the file format, or the third way is go to projects, go to new and go for a file format. So these are the three ways which you can add a file to your Data Services Designer. So the easiest way generally followed is like select the flat files, right click and go for new, right? So here this flat file edition or uh, file format editor will open, where you need to give the file name first, ff underscore customer, then you have something like adaptable schema. So if the schema means the structure of the flat file is not proper, means there are 100 columns and by some typo or some copy and paste error,
Sorry.
one,
Could you go over that? I didn't hear what you just said about the adaptable schema.
sorry?
I didn't hear what you just said about adaptable schema. Could you go over that?
Yeah, right. So it's about, we are talking about adaptable schema. So in case if your structure is not exactly the same, it has to be right. For example, you have some 100 columns in your table, and the data is pasted into 101 column, which does not actually have a header. Means the 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 cell, for example, the row number 10 and column number 100 instead of that value placed in being placed in 100, it is placed in some other column. For example, just let me say this. So this is our sheet, right? And okay, this is the structure of my sheet. For example, if I, instead of pasting it here, if I paste it here, right, I'm pasting it in an extra column, so definitely my system will consider this file as a mistake. But generally when you take the flat files, there might be a chances that you can have a typo like this. Alright, so instead of the data getting pasted in column number K, it is pasted in column number L. So initially, if this sort of data is available, data services system will throw an error saying that the record is a wrong record. So but if you set this option as yes, adaptable schema, means the schema can be adapted or it can be extended. So in that case, first it will read this data, and once it reads this data, we can go into the data services designer and we can understand what's the problem with the data, or we can correct it, right? So that is the advantage of having an adaptable schema. And next one is the data files. So data files, there are two locations where you generally save your data files. One is your local to your machine, and the second one is on the job server. We'll have a specific folder, and we will be given an access to that particular folder. Yeah.
Yes. Before you go ahead, what is the custom transfer program and the parallel process thread? I mean, what do they do? Those options.
Parallel processing threads, generally we give it as none here, because if there is huge volume of data, then we can say, use the parallel processing threads, where one thread will handle one set of data and the second thread will handle the second set of data. And custom transfer program. So if your data needs to be read by some transfer programs, like in SAP we write some transfer programs where your code will read the data from so and so tables by providing so and so joins, and on providing so and so filters it will fetch some sample data set as an output. So if we have some program like that, you can provide that program name here, but as of now it is no, so we'll give it no. So Coffee, in this thing, we don't need to know each and every option here, because these things are the standard sets which are required to read the data. Because see, if you see this, the date format, so this will talk about the date format. This will talk about the time format in our data, and date and time, it will talk about this. And if you have any escape characters, means the line will end with this particular character, so you can specify them here. So null indicators. So these are the general properties of a .txt file. So instead of confusing you, what I'm trying to say is, I'm trying to go and talk about the major options which are required for you to work with a flat file.
Okay.
Is that okay? Right?
Yes. Yes.
So next one is the data files. So data files can be saved. So sorry. So there are two types of data files. One is your inbound, which comes to data services, and the second one is outbound, which goes from the data services. So in a project, if you see, there will be two folders in your job server machine, the server. So if you see, you have the job server. So job servers will be typically installed on some other system, and on that system, on the D drive, you'll be given an access to a particular folder where there will be two folders. Like one is your inbound folder and the second one is your outbound directory. So inbound directory will have all your source records or source flat files, and outbound directory will have all the files that you have generated. Right? So there are two options where you can save. So one is you can save directly on your system, which is your local, and you can attach that flat file as an attachment to your email and send it to the data owners. That is way number one. And way number two is you just paste it, or you just generate the flat file into a common folder where you and the data owner have an access like a Z drive, and you tell that guy like, hey, the file is generated now, you can go and check it. So you can just send an email rather than attaching this thing, because sometimes we tend to generate files which are like more than 1 GB and 2 GB of size as well, and we cannot attach them to emails. So in that cases we generally go for a job server, this thing. And it also depends on the project size, because there are two types of projects. One is SMEs, small and medium enterprises, where you don't need much developers to work on that project. Probably there will be one or two developers who will be working on the entire project. So in that case they really don't need all this architecture and stuff. So because it's just two users working together, and they can communicate easily. But the second type of projects are called LEs, large enterprise, LE. So in these large enterprises, definitely there will be more than 10 people working on this project, and all of them sit in different geographical locations. So they should have some common place where they can generate their data into, or they should have a common folder where they can save their code into. Right, so, and the root directory will talk like the path from where we are extracting the data. So it's in my D drive. Okay, I'll go to D drive, and here I have my folder called source flat files. Okay, and next one is the file name. Right, ff underscore customer, flat file customers is our source file name. The moment I'm selecting this .txt file, you are getting a pop-up saying that override the current schema with the file you have selected. So what is the current schema? So this is the current schema that is available with the name field 1, variable character 1000 or 100, and it does not have anything. Now if I click on yes, right, so it is overwritten with this one, but it is not correct. Still it is not correct, because this data is separated by a pipeline delimiter, and this is not correct. So let us go and rectify that one. So this is new line, because since it's a .txt file, we go for Windows new line, and the delimiter is a pipe symbol here. Okay, now it is again asking us like, shall I go and override the schema? So give it as yes. Okay, so it got all the fields that are there in my flat file, but still it is not correct, because I don't have the headers as my headers of the schema. So what I can do is skip row headers as yes, and again it will ask me to override the structure. So you say yes, and now you see exact name of the column names here, their data types and their lengths here, and their content type. So address will have the type as address, region will have the type content as region, country will have the content as country, and phone will have, because see, US, UK, then Australia, and all these things have a short code. So that is the reason why you have a content type country. Phone number has a fixed format, so you have a content type. Address will have a fixed format, so you have a content type for them. Right? So now you can see the structure as well as the data here properly. So there's no need to do any changes on the left hand side, because a quick walkthrough, I selected this as a delimited file. I gave the file name here, and we gave yes to adaptable schema just to ensure that if there is any change in the structure, the system will adapt that. Then the file path I gave as local, and the path and the file name, and the delimiter we selected as pipeline delimiter, because if you open the data and see, the data is separated by a pipeline symbol. Okay, and it's a Windows new line, and these are all the default characters, and then you can go for skip row headers as yes, so that the row headers in the data will be skipped and they will become the actual headers of the table. Right, now click on save and close, right? And your flat file is available here, ff_customer. You can right click on the flat file and click on view data to see how the data is displayed within data services. So as I told you in the beginning, data services will not hold even a single record of data, but you can always go and see how the records are present, because once you click on right click and go for view data, the system will send a request for the flat file to show up in the data services system. So it is kind of an execution that happens and the data is displayed in the data services system, but typically not even a single record is saved within data services system. Alright, so now we added a flat file ff_customer, and the second scenario that we will look at is okay, yesterday it was XLS to TXT files. So today it will be TXT to I can do it for CSV, or that will be the same screen. So the major difference, that could be is like you just change the extensions here, right? .txt, .csv, so that changes the file. Rest everything will be the same. So I'll not bore you with that. So let us look at how to load the data from a text file into a database, right? So I have a backend database which is SQL. So I'll be using the same SQL Server as my target database, and this is the navigation to log into my SQL Server. It's Start Programs, SQL Server 2008 R2, SQL Server, and SQL Server Management Studio. So this could be the common scenario on which we'll be working in most of the projects, because generally there will be two sorts of projects that will be running. One is like a complete SAP to SAP migration, where you have both the source and target systems as SAP systems, and the second sort of projects is like a legacy to SAP migrations. So non-SAP to SAP migrations, where the client will be having a SQL system, an Oracle system, or data present in the form of a legacy files, and he wants them to be migrated into an SAP system. So in the second scenario, sometimes the client will not give you an access directly to their database because that might have some confidential information. So what that guy will do is he will try to generate a flat file and put it in an FTP, and we'll be reading that data from that particular flat file, and we'll be loading that into the target SAP system, right? So okay, just let me see. I already created a folder called db_trgt, a project. Okay, so this is my target database, which has some sample tables, but now what I want to do is I want to read the data. So these are some sample tables which I already created in the previous training sessions in this target database, right? So now what I want to do is I want to extract the data from a .txt file and load it into a database. So this is the second scenario. So what I need to do is first I need to connect my flat file to data services designer, which I have already done, and the second system to write the data into the target system. What I need to do is like I need to create a connector between the target database and my data services designer. So flat files, you add them in the file formats here in the local object library, but you go to data stores, and data stores will allow you to connect with the databases. So data stores are three types typically. One will allow you to connect to a database. Second type of data stores will allow you to communicate with the applications like SAP ERP system or Oracle ERP applications and all, SAP BW, SAP ECC. And the third type is like the data store will allow you to communicate with WSDLs, which is like a hyperlink data, right? So now let us see how to create a data store. So data store is present under the local object library, and this is one shortcut. You can click on this create data store, which will take you to data store creation window. The second way is go to projects, go to new, and go for a data store. Again, this will take you to the data store creation window. And the third step is go to your local object library, go to the data stores tab, right click here and go for a new. So this will again take you to the same window where you can create a data store. So data store is the basic definition of a data store is a connector between your data services and your source or target databases or applications, right? So it allows you to communicate your data services with your source or target machines. And now I will call it as ds_trgt, which is my target database. And the data store type is a database. So these are the different data store types that you can have, right? So one is your adapter, which supports your WSDLs and hyperlink data. The second one is your databases like SQL Server, Oracle. Then we have JD Edwards system, which is an ERP system. So it can connect to one world and one world JD Edwards systems. Then it can connect to Oracle applications like Oracle ERP system, a PeopleSoft system, SAP applications like SAP ECC system, what we call as R3 system, from which we generally extract the data. It's a OLTP system. Sorry. And you have BW source and target system, CBIL system, and web services. So all these are the different type of data stores, that you can support. So as of now, we are trying to write into a SQL Server, which is a database. So I'll go and select database, and database type is Microsoft SQL Server. So these are the different data types which you can create, which you can connect with database data types. Then the version of Microsoft SQL Server is 2008, because that is what we see here, right? This is 2008 version. And the database server name is something we can copy from here. BODS server is the database server name. And the database name is db_trgt, and the username and password. Right? So once you key in all these credentials, what you need to do is just click on apply to see if all these things are correct. So there is one more button called advanced. So if you click on advanced, you see configurations. So these configurations, not now, but we'll see them a little later. When we are talking something similar to that, we will include the configuration concepts as well. But as of now, we'll skip this advanced button and we will look at the remaining things. So once you key in all the credentials, you just click on apply to see if all the credentials are correct. For example, if I gave this wrong password and I click on apply, it will throw me an error, right? So I give the correct passwords and correct credentials and click on apply to see if everything is fine and click on OK. Now we have created a connector or communicator which will allow the data services designer to communicate with the target database. Right? Now my source connection is ready, my target data store is ready. So if you expand the data store, you see three sort of tabs here. One is your functions. So you can call functions from your target database to utilize them within data services. And the second one is tables, which is called permanent tables. And the third one is template table. So the difference between a permanent table and a template table is the template table will be dropped and recreated every time you execute the job. But permanent table is something like a table which has a commit statement on it. So generally in a backend database, you create a table and you just hit commit statement on that. That table is permanently stored on the database. So this permanent tables are stored on the database and they'll never be dropped and recreated. You have an option like you can delete the data in the table before you reload the table with the data. That you can do that, but template table is like you can drop and recreate the table all the time. So let me give you an example here where I can use a template table and where I can use a permanent table. Right? So template table is like, okay, I'm doing some development and the customer will say like, okay, I need 2 more columns in this table, right? So I can easily add that in a template table because every time I execute my job, the table is dropped, means everything is deleted and it will be recreated, which means the new structure is added to the table. So in that case, that should not be a problem for me to have a addition of columns or deletion of columns in my business cases. But permanent table is something like which you have a commit statement on, and it cannot be dropped. So if you want to do some structural changes, you completely have to delete that from the backend database. You go and write a delete statement for that table and you drop the table manually, and then you create a template table and again convert that into a permanent table. Right? So we will see more good examples on what is a template table and what is a permanent table in our future sessions. Now we have to create a job which will pull the data from the text file and load it into the database table. So I'm creating a new batch job. Let us call the job as gov underscore ff underscore db underscore ext, which says that flat file to database extension extractions. And the next thing is go and click on data flow and give the name as df underscore ff underscore db underscore ext. You also have something called annotations here on the tool palette, right hand side tool palette. That is what we call this. You have something like annotations here. So you click on the annotation and click back in the designer and you can type some comments like this job is to do extractions from flat file to database table. So you can type some annotation here so that generally what happens, the developer completes the job and he moves out of the project and somebody will support this activity. So the supporting guy can understand like what is happening in this job. So there are different levels of the code where you can write annotations, which will be separately looking in a separate topic called annotations. What are the different areas where we can write the annotations in the code and how they support the quality aspects and all. We'll look at that. So now, right, so I need to go to my formats, select my source flat file and make it as my source. So flat file, every time I drag and drop it into the data flow, it will ask me either you want to create that as a source file or a target file. So since in this case it is your source, you make it as your source. But yesterday when we are creating this customer target, I dragged and dropped it and made it as my target customer. Okay, so it depends on the case you utilize that. Next one is your database table. So I just click on this template. So 1 second, sorry. Right, I have this template table shortcut which is present on the right hand side tool palette. So I just click on that and click back on the data flow. Now I get a create template table template where I can key in the table name, and if there are more than one data stores, I can select within the data stores to which data store I want to write it to. So now it is your target data store, you select it, and the database owner name, it is like database owner DBO for SQL Server, and for Oracle systems it will be kind of DBA. So you can change that as well. This is one way of creating a template table, and the second way is go to your data store, select the template table, drag and drop it into your data flow. Now you don't get one more option here like the data store name because you are already dragging it from your data store, so you don't get the data store name. But generally used one is this: go to the template table and select go to the tool palette, select the template table and click back in the data flow and give the name as tabl underscore cust. Okay, so I give the table name as tabl underscore cust. Click on OK and connect with your source directly. Now there might be a question in your mind that, okay, what if I don't want all the fields from my source? I want selected fields. Or what if I don't want all the data from my source? I want to do some filters. So those sort of questions will be addressed with the help of query transformation, sorry, which we'll be looking in a bit. Okay, so I connect the flat file to the target database and I do a validation on the code. Let's click on validate or validate all. So no errors found. So now I'm selecting the job, right click and execute. Okay, let's click on OK. So in this scenario we are trying to extract the data from a flat file where the data is separated with the pipeline delimiter, and we are trying to write it into the target database. Now you see the job is successfully completed, and if you look at the monitor, so extracting 91 records took less than a second, I can say, and writing the data into the target system just took 1.5 seconds. It is pretty fast, 91 records. So we will see more data in the coming scenarios where you see 20,000 records, 30,000 records, and the time ratio taken by the data services to read and write those things. Right? So now job said it is successfully completed. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So the job said it's successfully completed, and now go to the data flow and click on the magnifying glass here. You should be able to see the data, right? So 91 records are visible here. Now let us go back to the database, and the table name is tabl underscore cust. So this is my table name, right? So I refresh the database here, go to the tables, just check for the table name tabl, right? So this is my table which is newly created. Select top 1000 rows, and this is my data that is available from my flat file and which is written into the target database. So I can just, instead of giving star, and execute, so I get this thing. Or if I want to see how many records are there, select count of star from the table name, which will give me the 91 records count. So just to cross check if the entire data set is written to the target database, or if it is written properly, or the table name is one and the same, you generally cross check it this way. So this is the second scenario where we wrote the data from a database, a text file into the database. Now third scenario is we will see the data written from a database to another database, right? So you need to have a source data store and you need to have a target data store. Okay, so in this database we have some already created tables, so I will pick one table and make it as my source table. So for example, stage Mara, which is material master table, I have quite good records in this, right? So let me just change this. right? So it is having some 15,559 records, right? So I will use this table as my source table, and I will try to write that into another database table, which is like tabl underscore mara, and we will see what is the time taken for this one. So, right? So since we have the same data store communicating with the same database, I can use this, but let us go and create a new data store and call it as source. So I call it as ds underscore source, right? It's a database and the type is SQL Server and the version is 2008. The server name is BODS server and the database name is db underscore trgt. Username and password. Right, just click on apply to see if all the credentials are correct and click on OK. Your data store, source data store is created. Now again it has all the three structures, functions, tables and template tables. But I don't see the table which is stage Mara that I have to extract from, right? My intention is to extract these 15,000 records from stage Mara and write it into another table. But I cannot do that because I don't see a table here. So to import the tables, right, to import the metadata, the data, the table structure into data services, what you can do is you can select the data store, right click and go for import by name. Just give me a second, Coffee.
Okay.
Right, sorry for that. Right, so now I don't see the table name. So to import the table name or to import the table structure from my source table, source database, what I need to do is first initially we need to create a data store which communicates with your source database. And if you are sure about the name, so you can go and select import by name and you directly give the name here stage underscore Mara and click on import. Now it says there's okay, cannot be imported for the data store. Table does not exist in the database or information. Okay, there's something wrong. So just let me cross check the credentials here. So that sort of error message when it will show you when you don't find the proper information there. So that can.
Welcome to GoToMeeting, online meetings made easy. There are two other callers on the call.
Okay, let us try the other way. Maybe the connection between the servers is a little down. So I can search, select the data store, right click and click on search. Right, so search in which data store. So we have ds underscore source data store, and that is not an external internal data, so we are searching for an external data, and we are searching for object type that is table, and it contains the table name as MARA, right? it contains. So you can select like it is equal to, so give the full table name, or if you just know the bit and pieces of the table name, you can select on contains and just click on search. So this might take few seconds, but it will list down all the tables that are present in your database with the name MARA. So this is the table that we want to import with. So select the table, right click and import. Now this table is added to your permanent table list, stage_Mara. Right. So this is one way you import the table. The second way is like if you are sure about the table name, you just right click, go and import by name. Somehow it is not working here, but this is how it works. Just click on import. You should not get this error, so it should directly import the table name here. So now you added your source table StageMara, and you will be writing the data into a target table, which is like ds_target data store, which has in which we will create a template table, which will be like tabl_mara, and we'll be writing the data from StageMara to tablMara. Right. So let us create a job for that, and I call this job as job_db ext, database to database extractions, and next I call a data flow df_db ext. Right, so I select my source table and I drag and drop it, and it will ask me for two options, whether I want to make it as a source table or a target table. So for permanent table you get these options here, but for a template table you don't get any options. You just drag and drop it, it becomes your source. Right? Because this template table is dropped and recreated all the time, but permanent table is something which is standard, so it will ask you to use this table as your source or target. Right, so this is my source table, and you just click on the magnifying glass and you see the data available here. So just click on close. Next, create a template table and call it as tabl_mara, and now you see the drop down here. There are two data stores, like one is your source and one is your target. We want to write it into a target data store, so just click on OK. And either you can directly connect, we will start using the query transformation in a bit. So as of now I'll directly connect and validate this one, no errors found. Then select the job, right click and execute. So now you just go to the monitor, because we have good records, we can see what exactly happens in the monitor in the backend. So once it is activated, okay, so if you look at this, 15,000 records are read in 0 seconds, absolutely zero, in no time, and writing to the same database, it just took 0.0.1 seconds, and the total execution is 6 seconds for 16,000 records, right? This happens because we are trying to write the data from the same database to the same database, because we are using the same database as our source and target. So that's the reason why it's that fast. So you select the database, refresh and expand and see. Right, you have tablMara. Select 1000 rows, or you can just give a star here. Right, so I get all this data here, my material master data. So this is an example of database to database extraction, and next one we will see is SAP to alright, we will see one more here, database to flat file extraction, and after that we will see SAP to database or flat file extractions. So with this we'll pretty much cover the different type of extractions that we can do here. Right. So database to database is done. Now database to flat file, right? So I'll be using the same table, stage Mara, and now what I have to do is I have to write it into a flat file. So let me create a new job underscore db underscore ff underscore ext. I call it as df underscore db underscore ff underscore ext, right? So I use my stage Mara table, make it as source. Now generally what we do is we go to the files, right click and create a new flat file and use it as a target. So that is the general scenario which we have learned when we are creating ff underscore target customer. But now we will see another scenario which is like the best industry practice, what I can say. When you are creating a flat file, I'll tell you the difference as well. So click on the query transformation on the tool palette, click back on the designer data flow, connect it with your source. Now open the query transformation. So query transformation is broadly divided into three regions. One is your schema in here, which represents the source structure. This is your schema out, which represents the target structure, and a set of options where you can do the manipulations on the data. We'll look in details about this query transformation when we read about the transformations here. So we have the platform transformations under which query is present. So query will be the first transformation that we'll be knowing, and query transformation is such a wonderful transformation that you utilize this query transformation as like when you take a percentage of the entire transformations that you use query transformation 70% times in a project, right, compared to the other transformations. Because this transformation allow you to do wonders like anything. You want to do a filter, you want to do a business logic, you want to do structural changes, you want to add or delete columns, everything can be done within a query transformation. We'll look in more details a little later. Right, I'm taking the entire structure from schema in to schema out. How do I do that? I select all the fields here, I copy that, and if I want to select only a set of fields, I can select them and copy them to my schema out, like drag and drop. Right, I can do that, or I can just delete, right, sorry, I can just delete one column from here, right, or to show like I can do one-on-one extractions as well. And you can select all fields, set of fields or single fields and move them to the schema out. Right, now the second way of creating a flat file, which is like the industry specific solution, which is the solution that you'll learn when you work with the project, is select the query here, which is the name of the query transformation. So if you just go and change the name of this query transformation to what I call is as qt underscore ext, query transformation for extraction, right, the name here also will change, right? So select the schema out top node, right click and go for create a file format, right? So give it as ff underscore cust underscore exts. So that is the name that you are giving here, and the root directory that you want to write it to is your desktop. So let us select desktop here and click on OK. And the file name, so we have to give a file name here, so give this file name and call it as .csv, and it's a comma separated file and with a new line, and skip the row headers with no, you just make it as yes and click on save. Right, so the difference that is present between this flat file and this flat file is, now if I just click on edit, you see the structure is already present here, right? I see the structure, the structure of this table is present from here to here. But initially when we created a flat file, this one, so this flat file does not have a structure. Right? At the time you execute the data, so this structure will read whatever the data that is coming from your source, and it will try to, camouflage it like it has the same structure as the source. But this is not the proper way, or it is also one of the way which you can create, but this is always the best option where you can create your structure, because this has the structure and it is having the proper data type and their lengths, right? Because when you try to read the data into the SAP system from a flat file, there is an option called LSMW, Legacy System Migration Workbench, and that is the way through which you directly load the data into the target SAP system when you are reading the data from a flat file. And in those scenarios, your flat file structure should meet the structure of the SAP table. So then only it will be easy for you to read the data from an LSMW program. So in that case, you need to say what is the structure of your target file rather than creating some target file like this, right? So on the go, whenever somebody changes the structure, this will also change their data type, name, and structure. But this is something which is a fixed structure. So, right, this is a fixed structure, so there's no need for you to change this. So now select this cust ext and now make it as a target and connect it with your query transformation. Now validate to see if there are any errors. No errors found. Execute this, and end of the job you should be seeing a flat file created on your desktop with the name ff_cust_ext. Right, the job is completed successfully. Let us go to our desktop and refresh. See, this is my CSV file, ff_cust_ext, and I open this. Right, I see the data here. So this is like 15,000 records, 15,500 odd records that I have here. Okay. Right, I have the entire data written into a flat file, and even I can decide on like what type of a file which I have to create with this data services designer. I can either choose a .txt, .csv, or .xls file and all those things. Right. So the next scenario that we'll be looking at is extracting the data from an SAP system. So Kofi, I have a question here. So are you familiar with SAP?
Yes, I am.
Oh, that's perfect. So it saves my energy and time. So right, so I log into an SAP system which is ECC, and I go to a C11 transaction where I search for a table called KNA1, which is our, sorry, right, which is my general customer data, and I see the data here. Right, I have some records here which I can see only 500 hits in my SAP system. Now what I want to do is, okay, it has number of entries like 8,081 records. Now my intention is to read this data from my SAP system, and I want to write it into a database or a flat file. So that is the next example that I'm trying to show here. Right. So if you look at the SAP system, so SAP system is something like this. It is not a database, but it is an application which sits on top of a database. So every time you send a request to extract the data from SAP system, so first it goes to the application which we are seeing right now, and it tries to connect to the database from this application, and it will pull the data to the application, and the application will give the data to your data services designer. So between the database and data services, you have something called application. So there's a small difference when we are creating the data store. So you have to create a separate data store for SAP applications. Now let us go and create a data store which will communicate between the SAP system and data services. So right click, go for new, and the same window opens. We call it as ds underscore SAP. And now this is not a database type, but this is an SAP application. Now the moment I change the data store type from database to SAP application or Oracle application, right? Sorry. The credential screen is automatically changed, right? So you need to give the application server username and password. So I go to the logon pad, right? Right click on this and go to properties. I can select my application server here and instance number as well. So I give the application server the user I have to access and my password. And next click on advanced. And here you need to, for SAP system, you need to give some extra credentials here. So you have to give the client number into which we are logging. The client is 800, right? You can see the client information here. The client is 800. And the system number is our instance number, which is 65, which you can see in the property screen, right? This is the instance number. Right, and you have an option called execute in the background. Generally when we do the loads or load the data from one data to one table to another table, or from ECC to cubes on the BW, we get an option like execute in the background. So you can select that, or you can do an execution in the foreground as well. So generally background is suggested. And data transfer methods. So if you see, there are like typical three types of data transfer methods. One is, the fourth one is the custom transfer, which you can do your own method. But generally these are the three typical data transfer methods suggested by SAP. One is your direct download, which allows you to directly download the data from an SAP table into the data services system. So I just want to show a diagram here. Right, so in this case, if it is a direct download, what SAP does is, let us take, this is our Mara table and this is my database. So it directly downloads the data from my Mara table to my database. And the second option is a shared directory. Right, so now this is not a direct download, but what it does is, on the system on which this Mara table is present, there will be a directory which is having a common access for this SAP system as well as the system on which your BODS is designed. So it pushes the data from the database table into this particular folder, and the data will be saved in a .dat format or .abap format, which is SAP ABAP formats. And the data from this folder is read into Data Services Designer in the form of a flat file. So instead of communicating directly with the application, and an intern application will communicate with the database, you directly extract the data from the database and put it into a flat file format, and you read the flat file data into the Data Services Designer. So this scenario, shared directory scenario, is utilized when we are having huge volume of data. And the next one is again FTP, file transfer protocol. So this is, you have huge volume of data. So similarly you do the same thing, but instead of having this folder, FTP folder on the SAP system, there will be a separate FTP folder created, and you need to key in all the FTP server credentials, the username, password, and the path of the FTP server. So in that case, this data is now extracted from the ECC tables and it is pushed onto the FTP folder, and from this FTP folder it is read into your data services designer. So these are the three mechanisms or transfer methods, I can say. So when you have less volume of data, you directly go for direct download or a shared directory or an FTP. So generally it's suggested by SAP is like if you have more than 10,000 records, you utilize the shared directory. So now we know that there are a good number of records in our source KNA1. So I'm trying to utilize the shared directory here, and this will be the work directory on the SAP server. Like on the SAP system, what is the folder, common shared folder that you have, and application path for the shared directory. These two can be the same, so we are trying to write the application path and the work directory as same, and generate execute ABAP directory. So when you create this data store and when you execute this job, it will create a backend log. So this log has to be written in some directory. So that's the reason why I'm giving the SAP my local directory here. And security is SAP underscore all. So that is the security that you provide here. And the next one is number of connection retries. So by default it is 3, but change it to 1, because in an SAP system, if you key in the wrong password for 3 times, it will just get locked, and you have to go to super user 1 SU01 to change that. So these are the credentials that we need to give here. These are the pretty much credentials that we need to give. So I just repeat, I select the data store type as application, the server application server name, the username and password, then the client number and the instance number, which is 865, and you need to give the directory or transfer method and the shared directory and the work directory as well, and you need to key in the security profile, number of connection retries, and that's it. So once you are done with all the credentials, just click on apply to see if all the credentials are correct. If it is not throwing an error, it means that it is correct. So click on OK and your data store is created. Now to import the metadata of SAP LFA1, so select the table, right click and go by import by name. Right, so I give LFA1 here. Okay, so I think this has a problem. So let me search now. So I search for DS SAP data store, and I search for external data, and I'm searching for tables, and this contains LFA1. Search invalid parameters. Start and run. Okay. Why? Just give me a second. I think the connection is broken, RFC connection. So now BODs is trying to communicate with SAP system which is actually present in US. So it's taking some time. So irrespective of the geographical location or the connections, or and irrespective of the intranet that you are present in, I'm sorry, I have bad cold. So it will connect and search the database for the table name. So it will display all the table names that has LFA1 in it, but this is our customer information. So select that, right click and click on import. Oh, so this is just give me a second, coffee. I'm just trying to check the connections here. If not, we'll continue the same topic in tomorrow's session. Probably Coffee, I have guests coming in tomorrow, so I need to pick them early in the morning. So tomorrow we will not have a session for sure, and we'll have a session on like day after tomorrow at the same time.
Okay. So on Saturday, what time do we have sessions?
Same time, 8 o'clock your evening.
Okay.
Right. Okay, the thing is that this SAP connections, there are so many SAP connections.